With war clouds gathering over the Strait of Hormuz and Iran possibly having laid a submarine Great Wall of mines, why did the U.S. military instead rush to withdraw its few remaining main mine-sweeping vessels overnight to the calm waters of Penang Port in Malaysia, thousands of kilometers away? This move certainly defies conventional military logic. Just a few days ago, the U.S. military had high-profile announced the destruction of more than 90 Iranian naval vessels, including over 30 mine-laying ships. Almost simultaneously, reports from various sources indicated that Iran had begun laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz. At this critical juncture, the U.S. military's top priority should have been to bolster its mine-sweeping capabilities in the Persian Gulf to ensure the smooth flow of this global energy artery. The reality, however, is that the two Independence-class littoral combat ships, the USS Tulsa and the USS Santa Barbara, which had only just arrived in Bahrain this past January, and were the subject of high expectations, did not head out to carry out mine-clearing missions. Instead, they sailed eastward and entered a port in Malaysia. To understand the reasons behind this, we must first examine what these two ships were actually sent to the Middle East to do. Their mission was clear: to replace the 4 Avenger-class minesweepers decommissioned last year, and fill the resulting gap in U.S. mine-clearing capabilities in the region. Those 4 Avenger-class ships were true minesweeping specialists, with hulls clad in wood and fiberglass to minimize magnetic signatures, specifically designed for safe operations in minefields. The littoral combat ships replacing them, however, were not fundamentally designed for mine countermeasures. They are multi-mission platforms, originally conceived to flexibly swap out different modules to perform anti-submarine, anti-ship, and mine countermeasure tasks. The concept is advanced, but reality is harsh. The problem lies with this mine-clearing module. The system is far less reliable than advertised. According to a classified U.S. Navy briefing from May 2025, the LCC's core mine-clearing equipment, specifically the Universal Unmanned Surface Vessel, requires several hours just to prepare for a mission. In modern warfare, where the battlefield situation changes in the blink of an eye, such preparation times are unacceptably slow. Worse still, the sonar system sometimes fails to detect where the mines are. Even during tests in the relatively calm waters off Southern California, its visual mine detection system frequently malfunctioned. The risks of deploying these experimental, bug-ridden systems directly into the treacherous and complex waters of the Strait of Hormuz are self-evident. There is also a more fundamental design flaw. The hulls of littoral combat ships are made of aluminum or steel, which is fatal for mine-sweeping operations. This is because such metal hulls emit strong magnetic and acoustic signals, making it highly likely that the ship will trigger magnetic or acoustic mines before it even has a chance to sweep them. The earlier Avenger-class ships used wooden hulls precisely to avoid this problem. The U.S. military is well aware that deploying these all show and no substance vessels to the front lines of the Strait of Hormuz is less about mine clearance and more about risking expensive equipment and the lives of service members in a high-risk area. Rather than exposing all their flaws in actual combat, or even suffering combat losses, it is better to find an excuse to withdraw early and save face. Therefore, this seemingly sudden withdrawal is not, in essence, a strategic maneuver, but rather a reluctant admission by the U.S. military of the structural shortcomings in its mine-clearing capabilities in the Middle East. With the withdrawal of these two ships, the U.S. military now has only the littoral combat ship Canberra left to carry out mine-clearing missions in the region. The U.S. mine-clearing force in the Middle East has entered a period of generational transition. With the retirement of 4 Avenger-class vessels, only 4 of their kind remain in active service, all deployed in Yokosuka, Japan, and they are nearing the end of their service lives. Faced with the threat of mines potentially laid by Iran on one hand, and the departure of its main mine-sweeping force to distant shores on the other, this sense of helplessness is likely precisely what the U.S. military most wants to avoid revealing. From a timeline perspective, this evacuation is also highly significant. Commercial satellite imagery shows that, starting on February the 23rd, the U.S. military evacuated all warships stationed at the Bahrain base, immediately after which Iranian missiles and drones struck targets within Bahrain. Moving warships out of harm's way is a standard tactical evasion maneuver. However, deploying vessels specifically designed for mine clearance all the way to Southeast Asia, thousands of miles away, goes far beyond mere precautionary logic. When pressed by the media, U.S. Central Command and the Fifth Fleet offered vague responses, passing the buck back and forth without providing a clear explanation. This reaction speaks volumes in itself. They do not want to admit that an irreparable gap has emerged in their mine-clearing capabilities in the Middle East. So, why Malaysia? And why now? This ties back to the recently concluded Golden Cobra 2026 Joint Military Exercise. Led by the United States and Thailand, this exercise is the largest multinational military drill in Southeast Asia, with 30 countries and approximately 8,000 personnel participating this year. For the first time, the exercise included space and cyber warfare components, with the core objective of strengthening the U.S. military's multi-domain operational capabilities and dominance in the Indo-Pacific region. The deployment of 2 littoral combat ships to Malaysia at this time can be seen as capitalizing on the momentum of the exercise to further entrench the U.S. presence in Southeast Asia. In recent years, the U.S. military's global strategic focus has been shifting toward the Indo-Pacific region. While the Middle East remains important, its priority within the U.S.'s overall strategic framework has gradually declined. The redeployment of these minesweepers from the Persian Gulf to Southeast Asia is not merely about finding them a safe haven to avoid the conflict in the Middle East and prevent the exposure of their still unrefined minesweeping systems on the battlefield. A deeper consideration is that this military deployment serves to showcase U.S. military capabilities to Southeast Asian nations while deepening military cooperation with them and reinforcing America's presence in the region. After all, the Indo-Pacific strategy is the chessboard the U.S. values most at present. When viewed in context, the overnight withdrawal of U.S. warships from the Gulf and their shift toward establishing a foothold in Southeast Asia is not an isolated or sudden event. It is the result of multiple overlapping factors. On the one hand, the equipment itself is underperforming. Littoral combat ships and their mine-clearing modules are riddled with problems and simply cannot withstand the high-intensity combat tests of the Strait of Hormuz. On the other hand, there are systemic issues with the mine-clearing capabilities. Older vessels have been decommissioned, while new ones have not yet been deployed, forcing the U.S. to accept this current capability vacuum. Finally, and most fundamentally, the U.S. strategic focus has shifted. It intends to allocate more of its limited resources to the Indo-Pacific region to advance its so-called great power strategic competition. What this redeployment reveals is not a superpower that is composed and in control of the overall situation, but rather a military force to make a desperate, sacrifice the pawn to save the king choice amid the predicament of inadequate equipment performance and stretched thin forces. What this reveals, in fact, is a lack of confidence in the U.S. military's capabilities and the wavering of its global strategy between contraction and expansion. In the past, the U.S. military was always able to firmly maintain the initiative in key regions. Now, however, constrained by various shortcomings and gaps, it is forced to make such seemingly anomalous decisions. In the future, with the complete retirement of the Avenger class, the U.S. military's shortcomings in mine clearance in the Middle East will become increasingly apparent, while its military footprint in Southeast Asia will inevitably continue to draw attention and provoke reactions in the region.